All right, so moving on to the last panel discussion of the day. The topic for our last panel is Holy Grail of Data Monetization. And now I'll introduce our eminent panelists who I would request to come and join us on stage. First, we have Mr. Karthik Balakrishnan, Senior Director, Data and Analytics, Data Office for Wesco. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Next, we have with us Ms. Mathangi Ramachandran, Chief Data Officer for YUBI. Third, we have with us Mr. Hari Saravanabhavan, Vice President, Global Analytics for Concentrix. We also have with us Mr. Praveen Singh, Director, Data Engineering for PayU. And finally, on this panel, we have Mr. Syed, Atif, Umar, Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Nykaa. And to moderate this discussion, may I call upon Mr. Vipul Oberoi, Director of Marketing, CSR and Learning Solutions for Dun & Bradstreet India. Over to you, Mr. Oberoi.
Thank you, Pastor. Hello, everyone, and welcome, audience, welcome, panelists. We are now at the fourth panel of data monetization, and it's a very conscious decision to keep the panel on as probably the last in the day, because this is a whole journey we are taking on data. So a data journey is anything between it starts with data discovery, moves on to data acquisition, moves to data processing, and eventually moves to data monetization. And our sessions also started with the new trends of Gen AI. We moved on to talking about the very important and trending topic of Data Protection Act. Very important to set the boundaries. Then we move to the data strategy. And then it always begs the question, what do we do with the data, especially on the data monetization? And data monetization itself, we will be talking both in aspects of internal as well as external data monetization. So with the panelists that we have come from various sectors. We have people coming from data-specific analytics companies. We have financial services companies. We have e-commerce, and we have engineering. So panelists also come from various sectors, so you will also get a good view of how this whole data monetization journey should be undertaken. And my first question is, I'll start with Hari, and that is basically what is data monetization? I think when we were discussing this in the room inside, we realized that there are also a lot of myths, notions, and misgivings about what data monetization is.
Yeah, thanks. Am I audible? So, first of all, thanks for getting me here. This is my second conference. I enjoyed the first one last year, if I remember right, or the year before. And it's a great conference to be in. Yes, so the moment you think about data monetization, most people think that organizations are trying to sell data, right? That's not what is data monetization. You know, when I look at data monetization, there are really four kinds of service that we talk about. Data as a service, which is what a lot of organizations do. Insights as a service, which is a very important vector that the world is moving towards. Then you have analytics as a service, so that you're really making better decisions for your consumers. And finally, platform as a service, right? So at a broad level, that's the way we typically would define what data monetization is from a definition standpoint. If you go and look at Wikipedia, there's still no single definition for data monetization, by the way. And a lot of times people think about data monetization from an external standpoint, but it's really beyond that as well, right? What you do with data, the value of data is really what data monetization is all about.
Certainly. And in fact, my question then also is to Praveen, is that you have also undertaken a journey and you collect a lot of data. We say that data is the new currency, and probably it's more in the literal sense as well. So how have you in PayU developed that whole framework of data monetization?
Yeah. Thanks, Vipul. Hi, everyone. I think it's a great question. So as Hari said, that when we think about data monetization, it's not just only about selling data. Maybe probably it's in like a decade-old goal to sell data directly to telecallers or to marketing company so that they can reach to people and kind of sell them some product or something. It's beyond that. So right now, with the new age companies coming, we kind of do different things to data. To first, within your organization or within our organization, if you can try to kind of create segments of data and not sell data of a person directly, but create a segments or minor segments or kind of sub segments from that, and then you will try to fit it within your organization, that how can you kind of cross sell a product or develop a product or upsell something within the organization, and then create a construct that if you can sell those segments, not sell the individual data. Obviously with the Data Protection Act coming, it will be more tightened. You can sell these segments to different customers which are outside, and then you can find a way to either monetize directly or do some kind of trade-off with them, right? So yeah, very similar to what Hari was telling, that it's not about directly selling data, but creating analytics engine on top of it and kind of doing insights on top of it and selling those insights rather than selling the data directly. Yeah.
So, in fact, you mentioned, and I'll come to, of course, Atif here. So, you mentioned that data in itself has actually limited value. It's only when you convert it into information, then you have insights. That is where data monetization really kicks in. And Atif, you are
So
part
if
of
I may,
Nykaa there.
I mean, just chime in on that. Take a brand called Revlon. Now, if someone is searching for a Revlon lipstick, we can go and sell that lead. That's incremental sales for that one person. But where the real value of data monetization or insights lie is if we can aggregate data and tell Revlon where to improve their products, how to price, who their real competitors are. They might have some perception of Revlon being a competitor to Lakme, but maybe it is not. So to me, individual, I think all of us, the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about data monetization is, are you giving my phone number to somebody? But that is like real low value. It's maybe 10% of the real monetization. The YouTubes, the Netflix, the Googles sit on aggregated insights at micro segment level. That is where the real value is. Of course, there will be organizations which will try to monetize lead level data, but that's just maybe skimming off the top.
So the real potential comes in when you take that overall journey. And I would like to ask you again, because we are talking about the journey of undertaking data monetization, is that when you were part of Flipkart, if we can take that example, and Flipkart started off as a bookseller primarily, and then they gradually evolved into the giant it is. So when did your journey in Flipkart as far as data analytics and monetization really kick in?
See, again, I can talk more about my individual experience, and those experiences could be different. Data monetization as a strategy for an organization largely starts when there are challenges in growth. So organizations, when they start off, like when Flipkart started, it could just keep on adding new categories. You are selling books, you can add electronics, you can add mobiles, appliance. Every addition of a new vertical gives 10% growth. So why do you need to monetize other things when you already are getting, but when the horizontal starts settling in, when your customer base starts maturing, and that is when another 10, where will that next 10% come in? Where will that next 20% come in? The same applied, I mean, Facebooks and all grew so fast. But once stability or organizational maturity comes in, that is when data can unlock the next level of growth. And that's what I have seen in Flipkart, I've seen in other organizations as well.
So, like you pointed out, and I'm taking from Praveen's as well, is that when you are adding consumers, when you are adding the number of customers, that itself gives you that revenue. But when you have to increase your wallet share,
exactly,
that is where you really need those analytics to see and understand the profile of the customer. And YUBI there, Mathangi, is already into increasing that wallet share. In fact, you're into digital lending as well. You also get a lot of aggregated data. So how are you using this aggregated data for monetization?
Hello everyone, good evening. So I'll give a brief line about YUBI and then answer your question, Vipul. At YUBI, we are building the debt lending infrastructure for the company, and data plays a front and center role in making this happen. We are very also extremely committed to financial inclusion. And one of the ways that I believe that you can make true financial inclusion happen is through data, because data kind of demystifies any preconceived notion about credit and whom should you lend and whom should you not lend, etc. So that's our core data journey. But what started as data supplying to internal platforms and within the YUBI group of companies also. We have also realized, having working with a lot of PSU banks, working with a lot of NBFCs, working with a lot of enterprise, MSME kind of companies, that we could also become their data arm, right? So we could, so when here in the monetization context, I'm more talking about data products, intelligence that is driven by data that could not only help the financial ecosystem in India through YUBI platform, but also kind of become a data operating system, quote unquote, for our partners. So that's our journey. So from data management to API to different AI products, etc. We kind of partner with our, overall financial network that we have in India. So that's been the journey so far.
So is it that sometimes you feel that the data that you possess, a company possesses, and not talking about YUBI and others in general, the data that you possess is as valuable to external companies than it is to internal? Is that what you really found?
So, see, this is a very interesting space that we are in, especially enterprise lending in India. A lot of these data is available publicly, but not available in a consumer format when especially you are underwriting for large ticket size. Let's say a 5 crore loan, etc. that you are underwriting. So, one part of our business also makes these data very meaningful to the financial analysts, to the underwriters community who make these decisions. And then there is some amount of proprietary data that we use. So it is kind of data from that perspective we use aggregations and also informations, predictions that we make in order to make sure those decisions which are at huge stake given the ticket size, etc. Are well safeguarded.
Sure. Can I just add to what, please, the question that you asked to Mathangi? I was sitting in a panel, I think about 6 months back, and there was a question to me which said, is there something called too much data, right? Or you can also call it marginal utility of data, right? So there's a lot of data available in a lot of organizations. In my mind, when you look at data monetization, it's an art and a science, right? What part of it you use to drive the outcomes is really up to the organization or to the institution to really make the right kind of decisions, right? So, when you're looking at data monetization, you've got to balance it both ways. Just because you have too much of data, it doesn't mean you're going to get better outcomes. It's a raw natural resource like any other raw material. Too much of it can be bad unless you don't process it the right way. So, going back to your question, I think it's a balance that organizations need to strike to really get the maximum value out of it.
That's well said. Maybe too much of anything is bad, but also anything what you use can be a nectar or a poison. And coming to Karthik as well, and we are talking about high-tech engineering, and generally people feel that data monetization, analytics and high-tech engineering are like chalk and cheese that we shall not meet. But your experience has been very different.
Sure. Hey, thanks for the opportunity, Vipul. So if you think about any high-tech OEMs or any industrial distribution companies, everyone, we are actually trying to move from, we call this as a digital transformation. Hey, we are actually trying to move from a trend of selling a black box equipment to more of selling a digital solution platform service. So let me break down how do we see data monetization into 4 areas, right? So the first one, as what Syed was giving, the typical example is, hey, if a customer is actually coming and buying some spare parts, materials from me, is actually trying to come for a repair, not come for a repair, I could actually understand all these trends and then try to serve my customer much more better. Like think about before your coil in your heater would actually on off and then suddenly morning you actually figure out that you don't have an hot water. you could actually have an alert which will say, hey, you know what, it's actually going to get worn off. So I could actually grab that opportunity to serve the customer, thereby my revenue from that customer keeps flowing, increasing and all that, right? That's one example. The second thing is, it's actually changing the business model itself, right? So typically, say you buy a car, you actually say, hey, the service which you hit, first 1,000 kilometers or a first month of service, whichever comes first, come for a service. But if you're not driving much, hey, there's actually an actual waste. But most of this business model is actually getting changed. You could actually use the real-time data coming from IoT. You could actually have more of an analytics-driven, like servicing, which actually changes the business how traditionally are being done. So that's a change in business model that's happening. That's the second one. The other two, I would say it's more of external facing, right? So say you are actually serving a particular customer today. Most of the equipment sellers, they need to actually serve a regulatory authority providing data in terms of, hey, what has happened, what's the maintenance record and things like that. You could slightly turn to a different user persona within that same company and then try to say, hey, how you could actually better operate the asset or how you could better deploy the asset. So that's a new way of solving problem with data. You could actually launch it as an app and all those things. That's a great opportunity. On the final one, we talked a lot about Gen AI. So think about, companies so Bloomberg has its own Bloomberg GPT. So, the organization sitting in big data are actually trying to come out with their own, Gen AI models, which explore a whole lot of opportunity of how they could actually monetize on the data. So I would say these are broad four areas, how each of the companies are transforming, which we all attributed to how do you monetize the data that you have.
These are very interesting areas that you mentioned, and you mentioned about getting data and signals from various sources. You talked about IoT of things, but this also gives me the thought that how do you house all this data? Because it's a humongous amount of data, and data is never static. The best data is actually not like a pond, but like a river, which keeps coming in. This freshness coming in. Then Praveen, how does a company and organization capacitize for such amount of data, and is that really expensive?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question in terms of how to not only maintain a scalable data lake, but also keep the freshness well versed, right? So yeah, I mean, in terms of if you don't kind of plan for your next 4 year, 5 years, it's a costly operation. And I see that a lot of companies have to go through this journey of rewriting their whole infrastructure, rewriting their services, just to make sure that either their data is well under governance, or their data is they are able to create segments to monetize that data. So yeah, I mean, you have to create a plan where it is, as you said, from the acquisition of data to till data discovery to then the governance layer and then the monetization layer. So all of these has to be tightly kind of coupled, but at the same time you should be ready to keep this in an infrastructure where you can easily kind of take 2 or 3 data from different lakes, which nowadays there is this concept of data mesh as well, which is a combination of data, small data warehouses and data lake in central with appropriate layer of governance, so which you can use to create insights. And other thing is most of the things are not sold as a raw data, as I told earlier. So you always keep creating kind of features in terms of data science, if I can say. You keep creating features and then you kind of create segments on top of it and sell, right? So in order to keep your feature refresh, it's also a costly operation to keep your features fresh in time, right? So that also you have to plan in a way that you you have an opportunity to kind of cross-sell, upsell or monetize the data, and you create feature according to that only. So you see the vision, what you want to create, or create a data product within your organization in order to monetize, and then only build a back pipeline to kind of keep the freshness ready or keep it on demand. So usually in this situation, companies plan to do everything on demand rather than keep refreshing the data and then being able to utilize very less chunk of it. The other way is to do kind of an on-demand kind of operation.
So does an organization wait for the demand for that data monetization come, or should they plan beforehand?
It depends upon the strategy what the companies are following, but in most cases it's like you should plan on demand so that your capex is also in the range that you want it to be.
So there are, of course, challenges when you say about infrastructure, the part of it. But when we create those kind of systems, especially when there are certain regulatory boundaries which are coming in. An hour ago, we had a very enlightening session on Digital Data Protection Act, DPDPA, and which is a reality. The rule making is still on, but it surely in about 6 months it will be there. And in the light of that, data monetization becomes something of a challenge. It is something whether you can really get into data monetization or not. So Atif, what do you feel would be the impact of this big challenge, which is, of course, it's not something which is required. Yes, one needs to, while there is a lot of data monetization happening, data usage is disparate, but, and government needs to regulate the same. So how do you think it will impact data monetization in particular?
Okay, let me start with something on a lighter note. I think all app installs will become more like the Facebook and Apple installs, where before installing you will see like 300 lines of English where you will not understand, but you will still say, I agree. Unlike what today, you just enter your phone, you get an OTP and you get installed, because they will now have to process for a lot of consent. To me, and again, I think this act is new, so we are just also evaluating and processing what it is. But it's good for the customer. It is good for organizations which are compliant, because it just makes it easier. There are a lot of data pilferage, customer data being pilfered across. Like when you go to a supermarket or you go to California Burrito, every time they ask you, you have not given consent to that person who's asking for your number. You don't know what that person is doing. So those things will get controlled. So it's good for customers, it's good for us. But the cost of maintaining data will go up, because you need to have different purge systems, you need to have data privacy officers, you need to have a lot more rules. I mean, every data leak has now to be reported. By what time and all, I think the regulations will come. But to me, that is the one thing. The cost will definitely go up. But in the longer term, it is good for customers. It should be good for organizations which are currently not using pilfered data. So it should help us.
Sure. And Mathangi, because you're in financial services, there's a lot of, it's a sensitive, it is a confidential information that you hold. How do you think this act will impact your own data monetization plans?
The financial sector has been always under regulation. One, over banks, NBFCs, etc., there's going to be more awareness. Data governance has been, in it or not in it, etc. Now, data governance will be an important strategy for organizations to invest in. There are, of course, plenty of products out there for data governance. From YUBI, we also have our own data governance products, because we kind of understand the financial space, and then we have tailored it for the Indian market as well to offer it to the customer. So, pillars of data governance, like even the previous panel was speaking about it: data catalog, data quality, data access, data purging, right? So they will become more serious, and even RBI is now regulating. One of the things is if you have a scanned document of Aadhaar, etc., even that has to be masked, right? So that level of sensitivity is very important for organizations to have. What data you can have, what data you cannot, you need to purge, and what can you delete and what you cannot delete, how do you maintain an audit trail. These things are very important, because at the end of it, if data is serious business for different customers and hence for the entire country, these regulations are definitely a welcome move. And what you could also avoid is data being kind of misused by organizations which have huge collections of it, right? The big tech problem that emerged could also be cut down with a lot of regulations, and customer gets a lot of control on who owns their data. At the end of it, every company says it's my data. It's never anyone's data. It's finally the customer's data. And you need to have mechanisms where a customer can actually, say whether you can keep the data or you cannot keep the data. Till they say that you got to keep the data because that came from this. So things on data ownership also will become clearer. When these regulations come, it's also important that, it also makes transacting with data businesses much more clearer and hence much more faster, right? So you're not in the dark. You're not operating in gray. You know what is what is white and what is black, and you operate, and hence the velocity of operating data businesses will certainly go up. It may have certain hiccups in the shorter run, but it will be beneficial for the customer, for the country, and as well as for the businesses which deal with large volumes of data.
So cost of that volume of data, yes, and cost of holding data also, Atif, you mentioned, will increase. And we are talking about all those technology and systems that have to be created now because of the regulation. And Hari, do you feel that also the cost of acquisition would definitely increase?
Yeah, I think the moment you have process in place, organizations need to follow it, which probably doesn't happen the way it should be happening, right? I think the cost of acquisition will really go up. In my opinion, organizations will have to become more creative about, how do they really work within the parameters, which is not a guideline today, right? Everybody defines their own guideline and stuff like that. The moment that comes in, there are going to be some short-term challenges, like Mathangi mentioned, but long-term, I really think that people will sort this out. So it's beneficial for us in the long run. In the short term, there are going to be some heartburns, in my opinion, including, from a cost standpoint.
But do you feel then the larger the data an organization holds, the better it will be from a cost perspective as well as getting that enriched data, because now you need consent as well. So you need that kind of big volume of data to make the most out of it.
Not necessarily. It really depends on your use case, right? If you are really trying to use the data for multiple use cases, it may or may not, work that way. So I wouldn't say that it's a thumb rule that more the data, the economies of scale will really work out. It's more about how creative you are, about really managing your data and driving your ROI versus really, the scale or the volume of data, in my opinion.
So can I say it will be more like a quality over quantity?
Kind of. I mean, it's more clarity, I would say. Are you really clear about what you're going to do with your data? I think that's the most important call out, in my opinion, before you really get to cost and ROI.
Okay, great. And Karthik, we were also discussing about this while there are challenges of monetization in terms of the regulation, cost of holding. There is also a big challenge on upscaling the technology, and which is not easy to do. Again, that is a cost which comes not just to, and what Praveen was also mentioning, is that how do you capacitize? You need to really see where your capex is. How are you addressing that challenge at Wesco?
Yeah, see, I would actually generally take a opinion how big companies are looking at this, right? So if you think about, say, 6 years or 7 years back, every new time, like every time, say, a year or so, you will work with a new partner, supplier, and then, they will actually have a different pattern of how they would want to share the data with you. And then in turn, you will have a customer who want to have a different way of consuming the data from you, right? So this keeps on changing. And the scenario would be like, hey, there is a new pattern. Okay, then we will actually scratch around, go and look for a new technology, and then spend another year to kind of shift everything which we have done to a new technology. You are actually losing a lot of time from a business value perspective. So one thing which I would say as a way to future-proof this is, getting into more and more into cloud stack is one of the thumb rule which I have actually seen most of the companies which are embracing the digital way of operating doing, even the traditional companies. So the more and more you're going to cloud, the cloud partner is also investing in new way of acquisition, new way of consumption and things like that. So, you're actually better off. The second item I would say is, even within cloud, there are different ways how you could actually architect the solution. So I would say you should really think about future proofing by going more and more into native services which the cloud offers, rather than trying to build your own, own kind of solution, because it won't scale. You will actually have a challenge. Finally, you end up with a lot of debt which you cannot use, right? So that's the second one. The third one, I would say, generally it's a good practice to think about a scalability right when you design something. Hey, is my solution really scalable for the next few years? Because people who have been in the data for so many years, I would be surprised 6 years back you would have said power of big data, but you're not saying anything big data because that has become the norm. So there is more and more data. You know that there is a lot of, like with Gen AI, like there will be different kind of techniques which will come. So that's going to be the norm. So people who are designing the solutions and systems should take that, hey, how do you actually scale? And then there are standard design principles to kind of follow to allow that to scale. So I would say these are 3 things which I would want people to kind of walk away, how they would design to scale systems.
Design and scale the system, and also you mentioned very rightly about we don't use the term big data anymore. It has fallen out of favor because it usually sees data as one big monolith. But the data what we have, any organization has, is very disparate. So it's coming from various sources. It's not always consistent. Not all data sets are complete, accurate, and have timeliness as their quality. So Hari, how does organization deal with such a challenge of disparate data?
Yeah, I think the first point is that disparate data is a problem for most organizations, right? If you go 15, 20 years back, everybody used to say, can we have a single view of the customer? Today, organizations are grappling to say, can we have a single view of the data, right? And with technology now democratizing data, democratizing insights, the same data is really processed in different ways, and people really have a very different version of that data itself, right? So I would say, at the base level, that is a problem that organizations need to address, which is disparate data sources. The second piece is, there is no silver bullet to say, hey, this is the way the structure should be. It really depends on the organization. For example, in global organizations where you have local laws to follow, like GDPR, for example, right? You can't have a centralized system. You need to really make sure that GDPR laws are there in place. If you look at the healthcare industry, in some of the states in the US, each state has got its own law, so you can't get the data out. There is something like residency of data and stuff like that, right? So I would say it is it's a balance that organizations need to work through, right? On one side, some amount of centralization gives you scale. It allows you to standardize. It allows you to govern the right way. But at the same point of time, local compulsions as well as market conditions will also make you go the other way around, which is, how do you democratize so that you get the right kind of actions and right kind of insights, right? So I would say it's a strategy by itself for organizations to really follow through, for any large global organization, in my opinion.
And in that strategy, Mathangi, do you feel there is a solution to it? You were earlier mentioning about data mesh and how you can develop those things.
Yeah, so data mesh is a new concept. I think Praveen also spoke about it. So when there are disparate systems and you want to query data on demand, data mesh is the way to go. And it is, see, the data strategy itself depends on the stage of the organization, more importantly. If you're just starting up, bring up your MySQL DB for the volume of data that you're getting, you should be good enough, right? As the volumes go up, as the number of business users go up, as the variety of data goes up, velocity of data goes up, that's when, you need to now think about, okay, bringing this into a data lake, from there transforming into a data warehouse, and then how do you empower other business users? Now, till many organizations don't need to think about it. Even the new age digital native ones, they don't start with data lake on day 0, right? So concepts like data mesh, etc., kind of bootstraps that process, where you could keep your systems the way they are, where they are, and then you could query them with the right access controls in place. So it's the data also kind of, you could mask the data on the go, you could control access on the go, and you can keep the data in those systems, not trying to build multiple pipelines, etc., to bring it into a lake. You're not forced to kind of exercise a lake till the time the data really demands it. So those kind of options are there, and some of these systems are also so powerful that even if data is on-prem and some data is in cloud, you could still combine them and have a view. For not so data mature organizations and people who are in the early stage of figuring out what to do with data, I think these are very good tools to exercise.
So if you have, like you mentioned, data mesh, and it could be more on demand, and that would also mean perhaps more up-to-date data, so that would be a better data to have?
See, up-to-date data is more real-time data, right? So what I'm talking, and again, real-time data is not needed everywhere. data with a lag of 5 minutes, unless otherwise you're going to make a decision in those 5 minutes. They are very crucial. Human-led decision making, which are very crucial. Then you really don't need to exercise things like Kafka or CDC events, etc. But if that is the case, then there are mechanisms to only query incremental data or build your OLTP kind of systems, which can run on top of production DBs without again getting into data lakes. So see, the important thing is, are you at a stage to democratize data? Are there many users who are willing to consume the data for analytical purposes? Are they going to build machine learning models and etc.? Then data governance come into picture. Data management becomes an important thing. Then you enter into a large-scale data management solution. Otherwise, keep your solution simple. Power whatever is required, and there are quick tools that can bootstrap any company into that journey.
I gather a very good insight from what you have mentioned is that it's not that everyone needs real-time data. It's ultimately on your use case. Perhaps one sector is probably like Nykaa, is that there is real-time data which comes in. There is the human intervention, the human decision making that you mentioned, which is there in your kind of business. And do you use real-time data and all that data, does that flow into building a better product?
I think e-commerce is something where you have a lot of contextual data that is flowing in. Unlike, say, I've worked in banks where, or even if you look at a physical store. So if you go to 1MG mall, all of us will see the same storefront. It does not personalize. You go in the morning, you go in the night, everything is the same. But if you go to a Flipkart or an Amazon or a Nykaa, I can conceptually personalize the storefront for everybody for what context you are. So it is, while I say, that is hypothetical, it actually does not happen. So I do agree with Mathangi that 99% of the use cases do not require real-time data to that extent, because while we have millions of customers, you still will have finite number of intents or contexts, which means it can still be coded in a non-real-time way. But yeah, there are use cases a lot of times where if you did some search, you did not complete, immediately the intent changes, so you understand what to do now. Like if you are from Myntra, if you are moving to Flipkart, if I know what you'd search there, I probably can guess probably you are looking for something cheaper. That could be an insight. And if that does not flow real time, then you lose that context. But so there will always be cases where you look at real-time decisioning and real-time data that you require. But yeah, 99% of them will be not required.
So again, that's, you say, very use case specific, and what we do with that whole data and make it into currency is the revenue model which every organization on its own has to figure out. Karthik, do you have any such recommendations for organizations what kind of different revenue models they can build?
See, I would say, there are a lot of revenue models out there. It depends upon the customer segment whom you are catering to. Traditionally speaking, if you are selling an equipment worth of millions of dollars, and then on top of it, you are going to say that, hey, I could actually sell you a digital app, which could actually cost you a few $1,000. No one will be ready to buy, because they will say, hey, I'm already buying like loads of equipment. I already bought a Samsung TV from you, but you're just saying that Samsung app in my mobile is going to cost, so no one is going to pay for that, right? So I would say, like from someone who is selling the equipment, trying to digitize their business. The overall selling model is different. So it is not just you're trying to do a subscription or a freemium. Sometimes it's just a value add which you're trying to do. So I would again go back to some of those revenue models in terms of, hey, what's the new business model which you can create? What more you could actually serve your customers by selling to? What other segments the customer is having a problem I could actually solve? So I would actually go and look at them, like how better to serve the customer, which they would pay for, which they would find a value. So that's the way I would approach that specific revenue model question.
So you're saying it starts from the customer's journey and decision making first?
What customers value, and then you kind of work backwards and then figure out what that model needs to be.
Hari, any thoughts on this? Does it start at customers' own decision making?
I think so. I think I was just going to add another point, right? Which is that with Gen AI coming in, today still the world is talking about Gen AI from a knowledge management standpoint, right? How do you consume it from a cerebral perspective? But if decision making actually moves on because of Gen AI, which is where a lot of organizations are experimenting, the entire concept of data monetization in my mind is going to change, right? Because it's actually going to become more user-led versus what we do from the upstream, which is where the entire data strategy actually flows through, right? So the jury is still out on that, and I think the revenue models will also change accordingly, in my opinion. Because if you allow more and more consumers, more and more stakeholders to start controlling what they want and asking what they want, the backend needs to support all of that, right? And your entire revenue model, in my mind, will actually change. Still, jury is out. I think another 6 months, once we get out of the knowledge management phase, which is where it is today, we probably will have a very different conversation on the power of data, in my opinion.
Cool. Praveen, would you like to play the jury on that one?
Yeah, I think the bigger question is that you asked it, what are the ways in which you can monetize the data? As I was saying earlier, that now the new rules are that you can't monetize on a person-to-person or a PII data. I think if you're running a business where the data is involved, let's say if you are phone pays or other UPIs of the world, Google Pay and all, you can already you have the customer side data and the merchant side data as well, right? So the mobile number against which you are transferring the data into the bank, like the merchant bank to whom you are transferring the data. Similarly, if you are in a payment gateway business, which PayU is into, right? If you can have a kind of aggregation of the data that against each mobile number, what is the total monthly value of shopping or the grocery or whatever that particular mobile number is doing, you can create a segment of 5,000 rupees, 5,000 of limit of segment, then another 10,000, 15,000. You can create segments of it. And then you can create product on top of it. Like if some person is spending 3 direct month to month, each 3 months he or she has spent 5,000 rupees, then why can't I kind of create a product which is on eligibility of credit for that particular person for let's say 3,000 rupees, and either I can directly, if I am in if I have all the mandate, I can directly start a solution which gives the person a credit eligibility or a pre-approved eligibility of 3,000 rupees, or I can sell that particular data to a consumable loan kind of business. I can sell it to Bajaj, I can sell it to 10 other companies who can serve these customers, and not at a customer level, but at a segment level to sell the consumable loans, right? So similarly, these are some chunks. So that's why we say that the data is the new oil, right? So with this, there are a number of things either you can build within your organization as a product or solution, or you can sell not the data of PII, but the segments of data to different businesses who can kind of monetize them later on, and you can also take profit.
In fact, rightly said, the value of oil, of course, like data is the new oil. Value of oil is not in itself, but what it can help anyone achieve. And that's a very pertinent point we are ending with this panel discussion with, is that we started with talking about data monetization, that has benefits in both internal as well as external. We need not always start with data monetization straight away, jump to it on day one. We need to see what stage we are in, whether we really have the use, how it will really bring the money. And the framework, of course, sometimes it's expensive, but it's something which one needs to build. One needs to build the guardrails, one needs to build the whole processes of making that data valuable for internal and external parties. And I think that's an investment. Data monetization is an investment that we all need to make because it's ultimately value that will come out of it. And as I remember, you haven't mentioned, but during our discussion, Hari was mentioning, ultimately it's a journey from data to value. So credit to you for that line, which is stuck in my mind. So thank you, panelists, for sharing your views. It was really enriching. And thank you, audience. We can then hand it over to Kaustubh.
Thank you so much. Thank you all to all our panelists. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.